The year 2022 has drawn to a close. Despite our best efforts as people, as humans, the world continued to spin. And as the world continued to spin, video games, they kept coming out. That's right. This is the annual awkward intro to the annual 2022 top games I played this year list that I like to do as kind of cap to the previous year. Honestly speaking, I was pretty not pleased with the quality of my last year's video. I mean, it was still fine. It was still a list. You watch it, it's like, oh, it's just a list still. But I think I could do better this year. Not a lot better, but a little better. But by making it maybe a little better and maybe explain myself with games a bit better this year. But in doing that, there's a possibility the video is going to be longer. And you're going to get more awkward hand gestures throughout this whole thing. So that's kind of how it goes. Either I ramble and I make facial expressions and I talk with my hands a lot, or you get very short, oh, this game was good, this game was good, next game, oh, this game was good, so you're gonna get one of those two things. Obviously, before we get into the actual list, some house rules, some that we continued, and then some new to this year. The new one this year is I'm not doing any honorable mentions. If you didn't make it into the top 10, except for, like, there's some technicalities coming up, but we'll get to those later. If you're not good enough to get into the top 10, to shave down on time, no honorable mentions, too bad. Maybe another year. Other house rules. These aren't just games that came out this year. I'm constantly working through backlog stuff of games that games came out previous years that I want to try to get to this year, and then the cycle continues. The backlog just gets more and more. So it is what it is. Also, another rule, there's probably some good games that came out this year that I was not able to get to. It is just a fact of the matter. So they may be eligible for another year's list if I can get to it, but who knows? So if you're like, oh, you didn't play, this game isn't on the list, and it's so good, odds are I probably didn't get to it. So, and I know there's a lot of games that are going to be like, if people made lists that would be towards the top that I just didn't play. I don't have an infinite amount of money, and more importantly, I don't have an infinite amount of time to get to everything, unfortunately. Maybe when I die. Another list, games. So while another rule is that if a game came out a previous year and I got to it and made it this year, it's still eligible to get to the top or get a top ranking spot. But the thing is, I've noticed in my head as I'm composing these lists year after year, I realize that I feel like I sometimes give special treatment to games that came out this year just to have a slightly more current list. Is that the word I'm looking for? A more relevant list? One of those two things. But it doesn't mean it's impossible for a game of a previous year to make it like number one or high on this list. I just feel like I do give a bit more of a bump, like a mental bump in my head if the game came out maybe this year. I don't know. I've wondered if that's ethical. If my journalistic integrity is ruined when I do that. I still haven't decided that that's the case, but I wonder every year. I'm like, is my integrity being questioned? One of these days, one of these years, maybe it'll become too much. And I think that's all the rules that I set for myself. I think. I wrote down, I went back and watched the old videos because I always have to remind myself kind of what video or what games I left for, got number one the past years. So ever since I started making these lists, these videos, videos. 2019, Death Stranding, great game. Super excited for Death Stranding 2, working title, DS2, I don't know. 2020, Final Fantasy VII Remake. That was a good game. I stand by all of these, honestly. And then last year, 2021, was Inscription. I wish I could play Inscription for the first time again. Like, wipe my memory. Those are one of those games where I'm like, wipe my memory, replay that game. I would love that. So, it surprised me that I'd only done these kind of lists. Like, this is my 4th year doing it. It feels like I've done at least 5. But I know mentally I've done, like, lists, but I haven't made, like, actual videos, I don't think. Whatever. And I think that's all the preamble stuff that I had to get to. I think it's just the list. I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna try my best to obviously what the game is, what it's like, some good things, some bad things, why it either got low on the list or high on the list or just squeaked into the list. And hopefully I'm not lazy enough to splice in some footage of the game as I was playing it, my own footage as I was playing the game, so you're not just staring at my face for 2 hours. How long is this video going to be? I imagine if you're watching this, you can see a little timer, and this is 2.5 hours. Oh boy, can you imagine me talking for 2.5 hours? But yeah, I did, it was this past week. I'm filming what, on a Saturday? I spent this past week hemming and hawing, lots of moving, shaking of the list. I take it very seriously. I know my opinion is well sought after. Couldn't come up with anything funnier. So let's begin the list. Top 10 games. Coming in at number 11, Existential Dread. Actually starting the list at number 10 is the Centennial Case Shijima Story. 2022 and lately, we're seeing this resurgence of FMV games, full motion video games. Video games where you have real life actors, real film, story driven type games, mostly story driven. And I think this year I actually played a ton of FMV games. FMV games will always have a dear spot in my life. I have a part of my heart. I don't know what the fucking, what phrase am I looking for? We'll have a near and dear part of my heart. I don't know what the phrase I'm looking for is, but the Centennial Case Shijima Story is one of those. Actually released this year. I've been looking forward to it for quite some time. It is a game where you take on the role. The main character is a mystery novelist. I'm recounting a lot of these details about all of these games, so if I'm like talking about a story and it's like sounds wrong or whatever, so be it. But you're a mystery novelist. You take on the role, and she is brought into a situation to try to figure out. So she apparently has like this, great mind. She writes these very popular mystery novels, and her like publicist, like PR person, is that who the other person is? Get recruited into coming and meeting basically the Shijima family. This family is has a mystery about them, a case dubbed the Centennial Case, hence the name of the game. the Centennial Case, a Shijima story. That essentially this family has a long history of fucking having deaths, certain deaths following them, like deaths in the family. And it's your job, you're being brought on to kind of figure out the case, or put the pieces together, mostly. Try to figure out who's been dying, or who's been doing the killing, actually. Of course, all FMV. And this game squeaks into the top 10 because purely on its acting, writing, the story plot a bit, and like costume design, set design. Because the actual gameplay of this game sucks. It sucks ass. It sucks shit, dude. I'll get to it in a bit. But basically, so you're brought in, you're solving this case. There's lots of things. It's a case that has gone on for 100 years. So it's a modern day game. It literally says like 2022. There's even sections of the game where it like has like this timeline that you can like pull up, and it has like events on one side of like where like happening in game, and then like events on the other side, the right side or left side maybe, where it's like real world events. And it, like one of my favorite funniest moments I feel like this year was like the in-game moments, and then it had like on the left side it was like 9/11, and then it was like COVID-19, and you're like, all right, cool. It's grounding it somehow in reality. So it is a modern day game. But the big draw of the game, as you're trying to solve this case over the 100 years, is that as the novelist, you're given bits and pieces of different murders and killings happen to this family, different lines of this family over 100 years. But yeah, I think one of the first things is like, oh, from 50 years ago, this person in this family died. And she's reading like this paper thing about it, where it's like, oh, this person died and this is what's happening and here's what's there. But like the whole, you're told early on is like, oh, but it's missing parts of the story, it's incomplete. And then some other character who's helping you in this game goes, oh, you know what might help you put this together in your mind to solve what maybe happened is, since this thing is incomplete, use faces of people that you're familiar with. So it gets around having 1 million actors. Instead, they have like a core group of actors and actresses who play many roles of different characters throughout the different things. And it's actually, at first when I heard about it, that I was like, that seems weird and bizarre. But it's actually a kind of interesting concept to get around having to hire a bunch of people. And I say that because this, and like a couple games on my list here, was a game that was made during peak pandemic times, because you can see some behind the scenes sections of this game where the you can see like the precautions they were taking during filming scenes, because this is all an FMV game. So you can see them doing different things with protective shields and masks, and then the distance and everything. And I would be willing to bet, I haven't actually looked and confirmed any of this, but I think they probably adapted that a bit so that they didn't have to have unnecessary amounts of people that they had to come in and out of working different scenes. And instead, you had like this core group of actors and actresses who were playing through the 100 years 2, 3, 4 roles. And at first I thought it was going to be wonky, but it actually was super interesting, because then you had like, they do some clever and smart things with characters that you, let's say current day, the actor is playing a role and they're a very grumpy and stern person, and then like then in 50 years ago they might play the same type of personality, and you're like, oh, this person's always the grumpy stern person. But then they kind of turn it on its head, and I don't want to give away too much, but then like 100 years ago maybe they were they're playing obviously a different character, but they're playing a more jovial person. And when you first catch that, you're like, oh, that's what a shock. Oh, you know, and it keeps it kind of interesting, and you're seeing these familiar faces playing different roles. So I think it was super clever that they kind of, I feel like that somehow kind of got adapted, but they kind of made it work and made it kind of interesting. as far as watching it. Like I said, super good acting. The actors and actresses did super well. Costuming and set design is excellent. Like I said, you're going through different periods of time over like 100 years from current day to 100 years ago. And set design and costumes, excellent. It's the strength of it. The story is pretty good. The story going through it it's pretty consistently interesting as you're going through, and you're kind of like piecing together either the small little chunk mysteries and then the overall arching narrative that's happening. There's not sci-fi elements, but there's a little bit of like mysticism going on. The whole thing, I don't think this is a spoiler because it's told really early, but like there's a fruit thing that this family has possession of that grows on this tree. And at first, the way it's talked about, you're like, oh, that's not actually what's happening. There's no way that's real. But it ends up being real. It's a fruit that you can eat or something like that. It's a fruit, right? Or is it a nut? No, I think it's a fruit. A fruit or a nut that this family gets once every whatever, and someone can eat it. Someone in the family can like eat it and get like eternal life. And then you start to see why these murders are happening. There's a certain murder happening to people that are like either taking this fruit and they're supposed to live forever, but then they're dying. And you're like, well, why are they dying? Well, because it's murder. And if you murder someone who's supposed to live forever, you can still murder someone. They don't die of natural causes, but they can still be murdered. The reason this game is not any higher is because, like I said, the gameplay sucks bad. It basically, and I say gameplay, heavy air quotes here, because the gameplay essentially boils down to you watch like a 15 or so minute FMV sequence, and you're gathering new characters, new clues, and new questions are being brought up, and they kind of collect it into like this fake like timeline thing. You're presented with like a fake timeline thing. And essentially they put all the questions on there on these little tiles, and then you're given a million, as you've gathered a million different clues of people and things that have happened. And you essentially, on these questions, you attach a possible answer to that question to solve the mystery. And then it does like this not fake, but this little thing where it goes like a little animation where it's like, did this person take the shovel and bonk this person on the head? Could that be what happened? And then you put another tile, and instead of shovel, it's like box. And then it's like, does a little animation, and it's like, did this person take a box and bonk this person on the head? And then you're like, you get another tile, and it's like, was it a baseball bat? And so then you move on to the next question, and you put all the tiles, and it's not difficult because in a bizarre choice, like I was playing on normal difficulty, but in a bizarre choice, to this actual gameplay thing, you can't like fuck up, because you just grab the tiles and then it like magnets. Once you get close to the thing, it goes, and you just stick it in there, and then you watch the thing. So then you've attached all these possible answers to all these things to solve the questions. And then your main character zoops back into the main character's point of view, and she goes, all right, I solved the mystery. I solved the case. And then you're basically, it's back to FMV, but as FMV is playing, you're essentially asked like a quiz. And it goes, all right, how did this person get bonked on the head? And then you like just pick a baseball bat, box, or shovel. And in many cases, I know I might be an idiot, but in many cases, it was pure guessing. Maybe through some things you could deduce that it wasn't gonna be like baseball bat, because that's whatever. Like, there's sometimes you could knock out like one answer, possible choice. It was like the worst parts of like taking a test in high school you didn't study for, where you're like, well, I could definitely knock this choice out because that's a silly choice. That's how it basically felt like, where every once in a while you get a silly choice and you're like, that's not it. But then you're just guessing. So most of the time I was just guessing. And then while it was frustrating of an actual gameplay moment, if you pick the wrong one, then the FMV sequence continues to play, and she's like, it was that person and they bonked him on the head with a shovel. And then someone else, some other character will like, it'll start like playing like comical music, like and then like one other character will be like, wait, but it couldn't have been a shovel because this and this, and then your character will be like, oh, you're right. And then all the other characters are like so dismissive, and she's like, oh, you're the worst, you're a mystery novelist. And then it essentially just takes you right back. So while that's super frustrating to play, seeing those scenes was kind of nice because it happened so frequently. And you could tell the actors and actresses were having a lot of fun with that. Those like exact moments where you got things wrong. But then you just keep going through the questions, you get them, and then it's like, ta-da, you've solved the mystery. And then you essentially move on to the next section. But that gameplay loop sucks. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't engaging. It took a ton of time. And by the time I finished the whole game, I said like, I think it was like 15 hours. And I saw everything in the game that I could. I would have rather this game be like straight up 7, 8, 9 hours of just FMV kind of story thing, even if it had like no gameplay, because the story and like I said, acting, characters, super interesting. Actual gameplay moments, long, slog, and boring, not engaging, simple as shit. And then the quiz parts, you were either just guessing or you guessed correctly or guessed wrong, and then you're just taken back like a few steps if you got it wrong. So then you just pick the correct answer. Like it didn't matter. But like I said, I loved the actual story. There was a final reveal towards the end that was super interesting. That it played the story and mystery played by the numbers. It felt like leading up to the whole thing, where you're like, oh, that makes sense. And then there's like a big kind of like reveal towards the end that was like super satisfying. But that was it. That's it. But I think it deserves the number 10 spot. All right, so game number 9. Oh boy, it's a goofy one. AI, the Somnium Files. AI, the Somnium Files is a game written and directed, I believe, by the minds behind the Zero Escape series, if you're familiar with that. So 999, Virtue's Last Reward, Zero Time Dilemma, those games. So high pedigree, you would think. This game actually ended up being, I think, better than what I was expecting, but it has a lot of problems, much like our number 10 game, Centennial Case. I think before I started playing this game, I had a friend of mine tell me that this game was not good and that it was bad and that they couldn't finish it or play it, most of it. I actually thought it was fine. I think by sticking with it, I think the story ended up being really good. Again, another mystery type game, but much like the Zero Escape series, its story and its characters are sometimes so goofy and so nonsensical that it's one of those aspects of like these types of games that you're either going to love or be so eye-rolling inducing, groan heavy type thing where you're like, I can't, this is too much. And in that, I mean, like, sometimes characters, like, out of character, like, say really immature things as, like, a gag, as a joke. But that's just the kind of thing, like I said, if you played any of the 999 or Virtue's Last Reward or any of those types of games, or any game kind of like this, you might know what I mean, where, like, some of those gags, like I said, like, I don't know how else to put it, like, immature gags happen in the writing, and they're supposed to be funny, and it's that type of humor. But this one, it feels like it happens a ton, so to the point where you're like, it's a bit much, honestly. But if you stick with it, I think it has a really cool sci-fi interesting storyline. So it's basically a mystery game. You play as a detective. Detective Date is his name. It's spelled just like date, but it's Date, and he's got one eye, one real eye, and then like an AI eyeball machine thing in his head. And it's clever, super clever, because it's Aiba, like AIBA. Like that sounds like eyeball. And AI sounds like eye. So you have like this eyeball that's like basically like an AI thing, and it basically acts as his partner. But she takes the form of like this woman who's like his partner, detective partner thing, and she helps him do like these crime scene investigation things. Again, if you're familiar with the Zero Time series, it has branching storylines and paths. By the end of the game, if you explore and see everything, you're going to see different realities, different universes, different timelines of things happening to try to solve mysteries. You see something in one timeline that unlocks a gateway to another timeline. You're bouncing back and forth. You're trying to keep track of everything. You get lost constantly where you're just like, I don't know what the hell is happening. And sometimes you're like, what happened in this storyline? What happened in this storyline? You kind of just try to keep it together. Your mind's racing, whatever. Actual gameplay parts is, again, one of the big negatives to this. You're put into like these, best way I can describe it, like virtual crime scenes to try to reenact what happened. And like I said, you then take on the playing as the humanized version of the AI, and you're sent into these crime scenes where, again, unless I just completely missed something, you're just guessing. So you go up to an object in the thing, you go up there, and then you press a button, and then it goes, do you want to interact with the object this way, or do you want to interact with the object that way? And then you pick one of them, and then a little motion thing happens. And if you picked wrong, then you wasted a ton of time because you're on this timer. And then you gotta pick the other thing, and you're like, okay, cool. But then you just replay. If you run out of time, just replay the mission, and then you pick the right ones, and you're just remembering. Like, there's very little context clues to try to use, except for like the odd cases. There's very little context clues to actually pick something that is the correct answer during these moments. Like I said, there's not like, you would think with a game like this, you're like, oh, I look at something in a crime scene, that's a good reason for me to do this thing. But no, you go up to a thing, you can interact with it. Do you want to interact with it or interact with it in this fashion or this fashion, and hope you pick the right one. And if you didn't, then restart it or rewind time. You have like a rewind time mechanic, I think. Undo mechanic, I don't know. But the story is really interesting. Some of the characters are actually really endearing and actually good. Like I said, Date is supposed to be like this goofy kind of detective guy, but very serious. But then, like I said, he pulls off some of those most immature type jokes where you're like, what the fuck is this? And it's the type of thing where if you're the type who's really off put by that, then you're not going to have a good time, because it is prevalent throughout this game where you're seeing things like that over and over. And meanwhile, like, people are dying left and right in gruesome ways, and you're like, is this supposed to like cut the seriousness of this, like, intentionally? Like, is that why it does happen so often? I don't know. Very goofy though. Like I said, it is constantly fit with a tons of their attempts at jokes or like musical dance scenes that are like, if you go and search like people who are fans of this game, if you search like tags or whatever online, you'll find people actually enjoy those because it's, again, goofy and it's funny and it's supposed to be like that. But I am like, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. It wasn't obviously enough to put me off of it. I just wish the gameplay moments, the actual gameplay detective things, were more engaging, which they weren't. So, yeah, there's not too much else to say. I don't want to like spoil anything. There's a sequel that came out earlier this year that I haven't gotten around to playing. I'm excited to hopefully maybe play that sometime another year. But yeah, it's good enough to make it into number 9. Also, side note, I thought this would be a lower angle. Let's show what I'm wearing off. Number 8 is Nier Replicant. I finally started the Nier series this year, not knowing, sort of knowing what to expect. I know a ton of people talk highly of Nier Automata. I haven't played that one yet, but I decided playing Nier Replicant, to basically the remaster of the old Nier game from the 360 PS3 generation, basically brought up. I played so many hours of this game, and I won't go into any kind of like spoiler territory or whatever, But basically, two halves of this game are the first half where I was doing literally every side quest and every little chore for every villager who wanted me to go collect some random shit or plant some flowers, and I was very happy doing it. It was very chill, very chill time. Doing the cross-pollination of flowers ended up being one of the funnest things I did this year, and all that was me watering and trying to cross-pollinate flowers and get like a less than 1% chance of getting this one type of flower, and I finally ended up getting it. Loved it. There was that first half of the game where you're just doing side quests, fetch quests, whatever, and you're just chill little boy. And then slight spoiler, you age up, shit hits the fan, things start happening, your sister gets abducted, you're going through multiple different endings. You're unlocking a million different weapons to get more endings. You get all the weapons, you get all the endings. You have some meta endings. You have some things that probably tied to Nier Automata that I haven't yet played. So I'm like, oh, I'll just lock that in the back of my mind. Action RPG-esque game. Actually, combat felt very satisfying. Leveling up didn't feel very satisfying because it's just like, whatever. Maybe it's because I was doing everything. And so like, I wasn't ever constantly like, it wasn't difficult or anything, which isn't bad, but it just, that's what it was. It was just, it was a decently, combat felt nice, bosses were interesting, large spectacle sometimes. I kind of knew about this game going in, but they constantly had like sections where they're changing up the formula of the game. Like it's a game that's primarily an action RPG. You're doing things, you're doing combat, fighting with weapons, magic, fucking whatever. But then they constantly will do sections where it's a text-based adventure, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? And then it does a top-down section, where it's a top-down, like, shoot-'em-up, dodgy bullet hell thing. And then you're doing a thing where it's, some other, fishing mini-games. I don't know. I couldn't think of another, moment. But, yeah, many different types of games as like almost like homages to other things. Oh, there's like that reminds me, there's like a Resident Evil fixed camera type moments where you're kind of like going through certain doors and everything. So there's like a horror element to it. Basically a game where they're just like, could we draw some inspiration and make a little homage to a certain game or genre of game? And then they're like, yes, we can. But keep it action RPG, and they're like, all right. Yokotaro's like, yeah, okay, cool, I'm gonna do that. But ends up being great. Characters are great. I loved pretty much every character was interesting. All the main characters, interesting, cool arcs. Like I said, once you get into the second half of the game, and shit starts hitting the fan, and things happen to characters. Some characters go away for a while. They come back. They go away. They're doing things, they're changing, they're learning. You have different moments, you have different cutscenes. It's a lot. I think intentionally it goes from that first half of the game where it's very slow. You're going around the one little area constantly back and forth. I think it's intentional if you do that. And then it like really picks up. And I believe that's almost guaranteed to be the reason why it was built in such a way. But it was one of my favorite series of this year for sure, playing on stream, just because of the batshit insane moments. So yeah, Nier Replicant, number 8. I'm excited for Nier Automata some other time. Maybe next year? I don't know. Maybe. Again, I wish I had an infinite amount of time. So, number 7 is a game called Immortality. But this isn't a special exception to my honorable mention rule. Game number 7, Immortality, hat tip. Tip of the hat. Top of the muffin to you, sir. Telling Lies. I'll get to Telling Lies in a bit, but just to explain, Telling Lies, made by the same developers from a couple or so years back, I played this year before getting to Immortality, as Immortality was releasing. I'll get to why I want a hat tip, telling lies in a bit, but Immortality, the second so far FMV game to make it into the top 10 here. This is a clever FMV game. FMV games of the past, of like your grandpappy's FMV game, was like FMV thrown into games just for the sake of doing it. I feel like a lot of the FMV games I played this year did FMV cleverly, like took it and like actually made interesting game designs and decisions around it. This was much like other Half Mermaid Studios developed titles. You are reviewing footage, in this case film footage, from basically 3 different films in the narrative of the game to solve mysteries. Immortality, I'm probably gonna have to say some spoilery things in a second, so I'll get to the original things, and then before I start giving some spoiler stuff, I'll give like a jump to this moment thing somewhere. But yes, Immortality, you're reviewing film footage of 3 different movies that ended up not coming out. Let's see if I can remember the names of the movies. Minsky? And then something like 2 Becomes 1 or something. And then, what was the first one? I don't know. I can't remember, and I'm too lazy to look it up. But 3 films that starred the actress at the main, Marissa Marcel. Was that her name? Man, I'm really testing the tops of my brain here with all these games and stories and plots and stuff and trying to make it coherent. Oh, not my strong suit. Memory, not my strong suit. Marissa Marcel is the actress. She's this up-and-coming hot to trot actress who's had a big build-up, she's supposed to be like a hot shot actress, up-and-coming. She gets her start in like a TV commercial, and then she's seen in that, and then she stars in these 3 films throughout the years. But the thing is, the question you're presented basically at the start of the game is review all this film footage, try to figure out the mystery. What happened to Marissa Marcel, the actress? Like, what happened to her? Where is she now? What's going on? And then what happened to the 3 films? Because you're told at the very beginning, these 3 films were shot and filmed and started to get edited or whatever, but never came out. So all 3 never came out. So you're like, oh, that's a good mystery. What happened to Marissa Marcel? Is it going to be something super simple, or is it going to be some crazy thing? Spoiler, it ends up being some crazy thing. So then you're like, oh, also, I was super curious what happened in the movies. Why didn't they come out? So you're presented with one film scene. I think it starts with like an interview, like a late night interview show. And the gameplay of this game is you find one little moment you can pause the film, you can scrub through the film forward and back, and you find one little moment or one little object in any scene, and you click it, and then it does like, they call it, like, for a snappy name, they call it like jump cut, but for us editing nerds, it's not a jump cut at all. It's not, but it's whatever, it's the conceit of the game. So I think they call it jump cut, and you warp to another scene that has that object or something similar to that object in it. So really, the game can take you from that late night interview with Marissa Marcel. Marissa Marcel, is that her name? I don't know. That scene to a completely different scene. So let's say you picked like a coffee cup on the desk of that interview, then you click on it and it goes and it jumps you to a random scene in one of the 3 movies where there was a coffee cup, and then you can watch that whole movie scene, and you just keep going and you're bouncing back, and then you're presented like this large timeline that you can organize in different ways. And you can get them in order, like chronological order of the movie or chronological order of the film order, like how they filmed it. You can organize on all these different things. And you're basically just trying to figure out, because as you start amassing all these clips and you're watching them and you're kind of trying to keep track of the different things and then what movies they belong to, you can see the Marissa Marcel change as an actress. Again, and not getting into the spoilery things yet, but basically, it was super interesting to, at least at the very beginning, I was like, I was curious about the plot lines of the different movies, because they're three different, very different types of movies. And I remember while I was playing it, the third and final movie that was more, I think it was like a 1990s-esque movie, like thriller kind of thing. I was like actually really interested, and there was a point where I was like just trying to find more and more clips of that movie, because I just wanted to know what the plot of that movie was. So you're unlocking all these clips and you're like, I'm lost. I'm fucking lost. What the hell is happening in this game? What happened to these characters? And then things start getting weird. So now, if I did this correctly, skip to this time frame here if you don't want to see spoilers on Immortality. So then what starts happening, and the game doesn't explain this because it doesn't want to spoil anything, is that as you're scrubbing through the things, sometimes you'll catch like these anomalies in the videos, like weird things happening, like the audio starts getting distorted. If you're playing with a controller, the controller will vibrate during certain moments, and you're like, what's going on? You start catching on to it more and more, and like you maybe see something weird in the footage, you'll see a different little thing, whatever, or like an image, a visage of like another person not in the scene starts popping up, and you're like, what is all this? What is going on? And then you scrub a certain way, and then it like almost like jump scare pops like a completely different character, and you're like, who the fuck is this? And they start talking to you almost in like a meta way, where they like know whoever this person on the screen is knows you're watching them, but it's super creepy. The first time like actual time it happened scared the shit out of me. I'm super easily scared. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then you're like, wait. And then like a light bulb goes off. And when you catch it the first time, you're like, oh shit. Every time when I was watching those old video clips and the controller was rumbling or something, or the music was getting distorted, could I find these clips if I scrub a certain way? And then it's like, yes, you can. So then you got to go back through all these clips you found, which at first I was kind of annoyed with, and to this day I'm still kind of annoyed with, because I was like, oh, I really have to go back through all these things and try to find where like these moments happen. And I swear I missed some shit because of that. But you go through all the clips that you went through, and instead of just trying to watch and trying to solve the original mystery, now all of a sudden you're like scrambling to try to find these anomaly clip things where you're like, you scrub backwards at a certain speed, and then it will like again like jump to get you to watch like this completely other thing. Sometimes it's like the person, like the mystery person. Again, I'm talking about the spoilery mechanic, but I'm not going to spoil the actual story bit of who this person is. But the mystery person will, like I said, meta like start talking to you through like the screen, to moments where she is actually takes the place of Marissa Marcel in a scene and changes the scene slightly, or does certain things, or there's again shit hitting the fan, certain crazy wild things happening. But yeah, again, I don't want to go too spoilery into what it all means and who that person is. And it had one of the most interesting moments where once that light bulb hits and you're like, oh, all these clips could have like these moments in them, and that gives you like a deeper mystery to solve of who this random person is. That was good. That was a fun moment where that light bulb hit, and you're like I said, at first I was annoyed, but then I'm like, wait, there's a deeper mystery. So then you're tasked with basically, what happened to Marissa Marcel? What happened to the 3 movies, and why didn't they come out? Who is this mystery person, and why are they talking to me like the player? Ends up being kind of like a horror-y type game, all things considered. So it's okay, you're supposed to like feel uneasy during, I guess, a lot of it. But I thought a clever way of doing FMV. I thought a nice, probably my favorite of the 3 games from Half Mermaids, like in this style. So Immortality, Her Story, and Telling Lies. The hat tip to Telling Lies that I played this year that I just want to point out is two things. One, as I said, the mechanic in Immortality is that you just click objects. And sometimes, like, there was no really controlling it. You were just sent to a random clip that the game wanted to send you to. And sometimes it was a clip you already seen multiple times. Sometimes it was a new clip and you're like, where the hell am I? It didn't feel like there was that, like, you were in control of what you were about to see. And if you had a thread to pull, because the whole point is you're supposed to see an object and you go, that object could be in this other scene of this movie. Let me follow that. Or you'll be watching a clip and then something massive or big happens and you're like, that seems so important. I want to click on that to then possibly take me to a news thing that could be a pivotal thing to learn. That's supposed to be it. But I was constantly clicking on clips to the point where I was like, it just feels like a crapshoot. It got to a point where I wanted to see more and I was like stuck. And then I read not a guide, but like someone on a forum or message board or something was like, hey, not a cheat to it, but like, if you want to like try to see more and more, is like keep clicking the clapboards that they would do for each scene. And like, if you just keep clicking those, sometimes you'll get to like scenes that most of the movie scenes start with like editing clapboards. So if you just go through and then you know what you've already seen, then you can start potentially seeing new scenes. And I was like, oh, okay. So that didn't feel great. Now in Telling Lies, you're not clicking like images. That's not the gameplay part. You're searching clips in Telling Lies by actually typing words or phrases or sentences, even if you really wanted to, in that game to try to find more clues. And I'm not going to go over the whole Telling Lies game, but that just felt a lot better, where in Telling Lies, it's usually like a video message, like phone call, video call, whatever it's called, almost like FaceTiming, between two people. And if you heard the message on one end, to get the message on the other end, you could use context clues or something they said, or maybe parroted back from the other person to then find the other half of that clip. And that was super satisfying. And that was like, oh, I'm going to choose this word. And I know that if that word pops up in another video, that I'm going to be presented it. But with this, I'm just clicking images and then jump cutting to another thing. While interesting and novel and a new experience, it didn't feel as satisfying as more puzzly Telling Lies. Oh, this person might have said this word and I want to find that other half of the clip or some other news clip or clip involving this person. Let me try to find the word or phrase that will bring me to that. That felt a lot more satisfying. Also in Telling Lies, I felt my brain being able to pull on so many threads in Telling Lies with all the different people and characters in Telling Lies. It felt a lot more satisfying following those for my brain during Telling Lies. Whereas in Immortality, I had like those few questions I was trying to figure out, or answers to the questions. And it was mostly just one long winding thread, versus Telling Lies, you're given 4 or so characters that you're like, what's going to happen to this person? Let me pull on this one a little bit. Let me pull on this one a little bit. Let me pull on this one a little bit. And that felt like a lot more satisfying again. So, those are my hat tips to Telling Lies, the game. But more importantly, Immortality makes number 7. That's the number it is. 7 on my list. All right. Number 6 is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. I believe I said that title correctly. I debated whether this should be allowed on the list. I think in years past I'd said like, just straight up remasters of games that don't really change much but make them look prettier or whatever. It shouldn't really count. But it's been years, and I love Crisis Core enough that I feel like it should be on the list. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Truly a 5 or 6 out of 10 game that is a 10 out of 10 game in my heart. You play as Zack Fair, who's definitely not Cloud, because he has black hair, but he's a big dork. You play as a big dork, basically, whose one goal and wish in life is to be a hero. How has he become a hero? He decides to join the shady Shinra Electric Group soldier group, which is like a super soldier force, fighting force for this Shinra Electric Power Company in the universe of Final Fantasy VII. And this game, they really didn't change much as far as bringing it as a remaster. Not like the previous year's Final Fantasy VII remake that I loved so much and mentioned earlier in the video. This is much more faithful, just remaster. Obviously, it looks a lot better. There's very minimal quality of life updates or changes or things that they added to this game that really, the things they did add to this game are so minimal and so like random where you're just like, what? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? But it's fine. It's really mostly just like basically the same game. And I mean that in the best of ways and the worst of ways. It's a very mission-based structured game where this game used to be on handheld PSP. And obviously they did the mission-based structure because it's a smaller game and a handheld, and like, oh, it makes sense if you're playing a handheld, do little missions for a couple minutes and then you're done. Aside from all the main story things. Story, voice acting, the writing, all laughable, but I feel like in the best of ways. It's so over the top. It's so fucking over the top. But that just makes me love it even more. The characters, basically, you play as Zack Fair, but there's really like 4.5 main characters, half being Cloud. Cloud comes in later on in the game. I don't think that's saying a spoiler much. But you also have Angel. Don't call me Angel, but basically that's, I think, the joke, not the joke, but the wordplay there. He's like, oh, honor, oh, honor, where's your honor? Then you have Genesis, who's supposed to look like Gact, which is very funny to me. And he just recites poems, and he talks in like that kind of manner constantly, and he's like, again, so over the top in this red leather jacket. And then you have Sephiroth, which is very funny because Sephiroth, as we know from Final Fantasy VII, this is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII, but in Final Fantasy VII, he's nuts, right? In this game, the prequel, out of the four of your main dudes here, he's like the most normal person for most of the game, where you're like, oh, this is, I think it's supposed to be like that because it's like supposed to be like not shocking, but it's supposed to be like different than what you expected. Like when Sephiroth is shown in the game, you're like, oh shit, it's that Sephiroth, whoa. And then it's like, no, he's actually normal compared to everyone else in this game. Everyone else is just fucking nuts. It's again another technically action RPG. You have the weird little like roulette things in the corner, just because at the time the developers were really into roulettes and pachinko machines and stuff, so they just stuck that in the game. You can just basically ignore it. It just gives you buffs and stuff. You do some magics, you swing your sword around. Like I said, the main draw to me is the actual story to it. Again, back in the day when I played it originally on the PSP, I was a little boy, very emotional, made me upset. I think at the time, I forget how young I was, but it definitely made me cry. I'm willing to admit, one of the few video games in my life that actually made me cry. Because the ending, because here's the thing, it's a prequel, and you know basically what has to happen to the main characters, right? Because we get, obviously Final Fantasy VII came years before, and they're not there or something, and so you're like, okay, well, something, you know the ultimate thing that's going to happen, and you still know that, but it's the way it happens, and how it leads then into Final Fantasy VII. And I played, and I got to the finale, not actually too long ago from when I'm recording this. I didn't cry this time, but I still did get emotional, because I think it is just a good ending. And like I said, I think it's more painful because the whole time is like I said, Zack is such a big dork where it's like endearing, the endearing kind of dork. Because like I said, he just wants to do good. He just wants to do good things, and he says he wants to be a hero. But unfortunately, him wanting to be this viewed as a hero, he joined the shady company, and then bad things started happening. So to a lot of people. So unfortunate. I'm really glad that they did this, because I mean, it's clear they brought this and did this remaster because of implications in Final Fantasy VII Remake. It makes a lot of sense with where Remake is possibly going into Part 2, either late next year or maybe 2024. Things that are implied at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake from the other year, 2 years ago. Yeah, it's with the things that are being implied in that story-wise and character-wise, without going too much into it, it seems important to bring up the original story of Zack Fair and what happened there. And hopefully more people played Crisis Core, and I recommend it. Like I said, it's over the top. It's goofy. If you're like playing it for the first time and you were not expecting the goofiness and over-the-top writing and performances, you'd be like, what the hell am I playing? But it makes it that much better of an experience, in my humble opinion. So, well, like I said, 10 out of 10 game in my heart, but number 6 place here feels right for it just being like a remaster and stuff. And it has its problems. It has its problems, for sure. It's not a perfect game. But again, emotionally, a 10 out of 10 game in my heart. All right, so now we're in the top 5. My 5th favorite game of the year is God of War Ragnarok. I honestly don't think I'll be talking too long about this game. I played the original God of War 2018. Don't Call Me a Reboot 2018. I played that last year, so a few years after the main hype of that game, obviously when it first came out in 2018, and I thought it was decently fine. I don't know where it was on my list. I was too lazy to check, obviously, or just forgot. But I thought it was fine. Was it maybe the case that I played it years after the hype, so I was like, oh, maybe I'm just not the thing, or did its story? I think its story was fine. I think it was better than fine, but it just didn't hit me as I think it hit a lot of other people. So now fast forward to this year. I was debating even picking up this game or playing it, and then like late decision, I was like, you know what, I'll play it. And I think I enjoyed the story and its plot line a lot better. Combat was still super satisfying. The menu system still sucks. Me in video games, I love going into menus. Such a nerdy thing to say. I love going into menus of games, and good menu UI design I find great and interesting to look at. This game, too much numbers going up, too much numbers going down, too many items placed in weird areas, too many power levels, skill trees in weird areas. There's skill trees over here, there's skill trees over there, there's skill trees for items over here, skill trees for your companion over here. It was too much. That's too much. But other than that, combat super satisfying. There's a potential chance that maybe I was digging into this game more because like the whole thing, so it's called God of War Ragnarok, and like it's really snowy at the beginning, like, oh, because of Ragnarok approaching, it's super cold and stuff. Oh, Norse mythology things. I said that so dismissively. But it's cold, and right as that game came out and I started playing it, it was like cold here in Texas. I'm like bundled up, and I'm like, oh, maybe I was just in the mood. Because me being not so hot on the original God of War from me playing it last year, games come out and you start playing them, I feel like it's just a matter of sometimes games hitting you at the right moments. And there's things happening in your life, things that you're working through, things you're going on, that could like so many outside factors that can like, with something as stupid and small and silly as like a video game that you're trying to objectively be like, oh, is it fun? Did I like it? Did I play it? Did I enjoy it? So many things like outside factors, I think, can impact your enjoyment on a game, I think. And again, maybe it was also because like I was playing this alongside a lot of other people that were currently playing it. So you're currently playing it in that hype cycle of the game's release, and not like 3 years later. After everyone had already played it. But yeah, super satisfying combat. It's still good. It's again annoying. The annoying parts that's been talked to death about it. Ironic, talked to death. But characters talk too much and try helping you solve puzzles, like environmental puzzles, way too frequently. Still, and you would think there would be an option to either like turn it off or turn it on as like, it should be off as a default, but turn it on if you need it as like an assistance thing. But you're in this game, you're traveling with a companion, different companions so often that like the whole point of the game is combat and like puzzles, like environmental puzzles. So moving things to get access to different things, hitting things to change things, whatever. Opening doors in certain patterns, doing things too fucking often. Like within like less than a minute, your AI companion's like, oh, what about this thing over here? You should hit this thing over here. Oh, and then you have Mimir the head on your hip. And he's like, oh, you should watch out. You guys should hit this thing. Oh, what if you try hitting that thing with this thing? And it's like, dude, I'm trying to just play the game. I spit saying that. I felt and saw the spittle go. I'm getting heated. I'm just trying to play the game. And, the characters talk too much. I'm fine with like what's supposed to be witty banter in the low moments of the game, traveling, the storytelling, Mimir telling you a story from the past, whatever. That's all great. It's just the constant talking during that. And then not as bad as the puzzle parts, but the way the camera is during combat and fixed like over your shoulder kind of thing, you can't ever see behind you. So they have a couple ways to help you with that. Obviously sound design is important, but also like there's the arrows like around your body that kind of like if someone's coming in at an angle that you can't see, like a blind spot, then like that arrow gets thicker and then changes colors as they're like doing an attack, so that you can roll dodge or guard or whatever. But the other thing they built in is in combat with your AI partner, it's supposed to be like they tell you someone's coming in from your left or your right or whatever, or behind you. Behind you! That's the one I remember. Like, hey, behind you! Constantly. Or it's like, but they say it all the time. They talk all the time during combat. Or worse, not only the angle things. Let's say like you get hit with a status effect and you're poisoned, or you're on fire, or you're frozen. And then Mimir's like, oh, you're frozen. You're gonna shake that one off. And I hear that line so often. Like, I get it. It's like an accessibility thing where like it's another indicator to let you know during the heavy moments of combat that that's happening. But also I see it visually. Like I see that I am on fire. I'm burning up. I'm frozen. I'm moving slower, which sucks. I hated being frozen in the game. Being so slow, you're like, oh, I can't do shit. Like being frozen was the worst aspect in that game. Or I'm all green and poisoned. Like there's so many other indicators where while I'm doing the combats and some of the like final boss fights or optional hard difficult boss fights, constantly being yelled at and being told, you're on fire. Oh, but the worst part is they say it, but then they have their gimmicky line about it too. So like your son, Atreus, will be like, yo, you're on fire, but you probably already knew that. And I'm like, yeah, this is the 5th time this fight you've said this. I do already know it. And I wish I could turn you off because I already know it, but I can't. That's the ironic thing. He goes, oh, you're on fire, but you probably already knew that. Thanks, kid. Shut up, please. It was a problem I had with, obviously, it was, and people have been talking about that. A game that didn't get on the list this year in the making the top 10, Horizon Forbidden West, had the same issue. So I assume that's just going to be a Sony first-party staple, is that games, whether you have AI partners with you or not, main characters, whatever, they'll find a way to just constantly talk to you to kind of move the... I've read about this. It's probably a game design thing to keep players keep going, because they probably have done studies where it's like, all right, if your average player gets stuck on a certain moment, that just ups the percent chance that they stop playing your game and don't see it to the end. And so I get it. I get that that's there. And if they're dead set on having that kind of feature there, include it. Allow people who don't want to constantly be talked to while they're playing a video game, as far as like getting hints to puzzles immediately, environmental puzzles immediately, or you're on fire, but you already probably knew that. Let me turn that off. You have like a game like this was applauded for all of its accessibility options, right? Great. The accessibility stuff, excellent. Very good. Love that shit. Hope more and more AAA games spend some budget to do stuff like that. Let us also turn off something like that. Hint system. Let us adjust that somehow. And the fight indicators. Because, like I said, there was some optional final fights where I was getting so annoyed. Like, it's supposed to be difficult. And it was. Some difficult fights. But what makes it obnoxious is continuing to lose, but also keep being yelled at that I'm on fire. Or that someone's coming up from behind me, even though I know someone's coming up from behind me, you know? Complain. This game got number 5, and I'm just complaining a bunch of it. But it's actually a super satisfying game. And like I said, I think the narrative and the plot was funner to follow. As far as like them gathering different... I don't want to go into spoiler, but get them gathering different team members and their job of like being like, all right, we want to do this. Oh no, Odin's a big bad guy. How are we going to take him down? How are we going to stop him? Let's do this. Okay, we got to go get this to do this, stop this. And then like the big reveal of the game was kind of interesting and satisfying, because when it happened, then you had the moment where you're like, oh, all these things in the past of this game make like a bit more sense. So that's like satisfying to witness and see. So yeah, God of War Ragnarok, God of War Part 2. Where does it go from here? My number 4 game, I made an executive decision to include. And I was like, do I allow myself to do this? And again, I you know, entered the Mind Palace, and I was like, you know what? It is my list. I can do whatever I want. So I did it. I'm putting, as my number 4 game, Deltarune Chapters 1 and 2, which is not the full game. It's just Chapters 1 and 2. But to me, I think I'm allowed to do it. Another game, probably don't need to talk too much about it. It's Deltarune, it's the Undertale, it's Toby Fox. You know what you're getting if you're familiar with those. I actually last year played Undertale, all the paths of Undertale for the first time. And that was fun, you know, playing a game that was hyped forever, and I finally got to it because I'm a slow old man. And Deltarune was a continuation of like that fun experience. It's obviously, again, not the full game. Who knows when we're going to get more chapters or release the full game. I feel like every time I do look into it, maybe like the idea of like, are they going to be released chapter by chapter or as one big thing? It keeps changing maybe. I don't know. I'm not able to keep track of it all. But yeah, there's not a ton of things to say that people with better words and thoughts than me could probably better explain. But it's a continuation of that whole kind of that storytelling type of mechanic, and gameplay and cleverness. Just a mix of like wholesome dialogue to like the introspective thinking dialogue, the jokes, the writing, like I said, the visual gags, things of that nature. I mean, not things of that thing. Come on, things of that thing. That's how you know I've been talking for like nonstop for like an hour or something. I just devolve into just saying things of that thing. So yeah, I mean, I want to see more of this game, but like, and I had such a fun time with the first 2 chapters that I played this year, towards the top of this year, that it felt wrong not to put him on the list somewhere. But it was like, I finished chapter 2, because I did chapter 2. Or I did chapters 1 and 2, I'm pretty sure, as chapter 2 just released, because I was like, oh, then it makes sense to do them both here. And then you finish chapter 2 and you're like, well, I just want a ton more of that, so, and I'm not going to get it, unfortunately, so that's a shame. Can't wait for more, though, of it. High expectations, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah. Good. Like I said, I don't need to speak much about this. You see it. You see the footage being on the screen right now. You see what it is. It's more of that. It's so. And I say the way I say this makes it seem like I'm being very dismissive about it all, but it's like, do you remember Undertale? Great. We're doing this. We're being more clever. I will say, I can't remember specific examples. This was towards the beginning of the year. Again, memory sucks. But like I remember chapter 2 having like a lot more like oh shit moments, which probably is what brought it up so high to me on this list, this final list. But yeah, great writing, great characters, clever, fun moments, great music, that classic music style though. So again, I'm not going to say anything that hasn't been said to death before, so I will end it there. Deltarune chapters 1 and 2. My number 3 game. My number 3 game, the game that possibly got moved around the list and had the most arrows as I was like adjusting constantly. But number 3 is not for broadcast. This game went from, it's ended here at number 3, and it started at number 3, and then I moved it down, I think all the way to, I have to look at the previous list I was writing, but like went all the way down to like 6 or 7, and I was slotting it in all these different spots, because like the more I think about it, it's hard to nail down position wise where it should be in my head. But yeah, not for broadcast. The third and final FMV game of my list here for this year. Again, another clever use of FMV. This was a game I had been watching, waiting for it to come out fully. I think it had like early access chapters previously, but came out fully at the end, or in the middle, or towards the top of this year, I think. You are basically what I would call like technical director, but basically you run and put on and are editing on the fly, basically news broadcasts. So you're seeing the FMV footage and different feeds in the game. And the basis, the original pitch of the game is, all right, you got to keep track of all the different feeds and then put on the screen what people are going to see live while like you're trying to pick the best shots. Whoever's speaking, you want to make sure they're on the camera. It's like the very most basic kind of like things I was learning in middle and high school. And then, you know, definitely this game gets high on the list because it satisfied that itch in my head where I was like wanting to, where I enjoy like that kind of production thing, the behind the scenes production and editing or whatever. But yeah, so you're choosing the best scenes for different people, interviews, talking, sports matches. If someone curses, then you gotta like live beep them at the right time and beep, and then keep doing that, switching and doing all these things, and then they start throwing more and more at you, more feeds, more things happening, more outside things happening, distracting you as you're doing it. It was interesting because this game is trying to accomplish two things while you're doing the main gameplay. It has very sometimes strong attempts at trying to give a message about things, because what you quickly learn is that beyond the initial pitch of like, oh, you're editing things, is that the story around you, the life around you in that game, everything starts falling apart, like society starts collapsing, and depending on how you edit things or show different things and whose message you show and how you like, I don't want to go too much into spoiler territory, but like certain political groups start feeding you video feeds, and you could potentially splice those into the news, and then you can try to like sway certain things, and it has those kinds of messages constantly throughout the game of like, oh, what side is right, what side is wrong, whose message is good, where did politics. It has that type of thing. And then in the same instance where like it's trying to be hilarious, there's moments where the game like heavily is trying to have like slapstick humor, fucking things happening on screen that's supposed to be haha, laugh out loud funny, which sometimes they're actually really good, sometimes really good clever writing, sometimes you're like, this is whatever. But it's very weird and almost like, I think intentionally supposed to like pendulum swinging between those two kind of feelings, where it's like heavy political messages and, you know, philosophy thinking things versus like these moments of what are supposed to be funny, I guess. And that's kind of why I was bouncing this game between like as high as it got here, number 3, to like 6 or 7, is like, does it really pull off those moments well? I ultimately landed on, I think it's good. Like I said, some of the humor is not great, and like doesn't nail it, and then sometimes it really nails and it's very funny. There's like sections that like they're playing like an imaginary sport game, and they're just making up rules, and the officials are making up rules, and it's like done like super serious in the game, but it's actually, I thought, was super clever. And then the other thing about this is, so the main gameplay are those moments where you're deciding what's basically being broadcast, and you're trying to, you're juggling a bunch of balls is the thing, and they're throwing more and more shit at you. But then the second half, and something I didn't know about this game, like I said, I've been following this game for a while, but something that happens in between those ball juggling moments of like the actual broadcast things is then you're sent home, and things you did in the editing thing then can have consequences in like this text heavy dialogue moments, like story moments, and like choose your own adventure, like text things at home, like home life for your main character. So you have like a spouse, and then you have kids, and then things happen to your kids depending on what you did in the news thing, and certain things can happen, so you're kind of like swaying. And it reminds me a lot of, interestingly or weirdly enough, like Papers, Please, where in Papers, Please, if you're familiar with that game, you're deciding on different factors, whether you're allowing people to in or out of the country kind of thing, and depending on how well you do versus your morality of certain things, then you are docked pay, or you make money. Then like at the end of those gameplay sections, then you're like choosing what to do with your money, and those decisions you make, like, oh, are we going to budget for more food for the family, or heat for the winter, or whatever the case was. There's basically that kind of like aspect in this game, because then you make choices, you like have options, you choose during those sections, and then things you choose in that can then determine different things in the again, back to the ball juggling broadcast moments. And so like I didn't expect that, but it added like this another layer to it, where you're like, oh, if I do a certain thing or I don't show a certain thing on the broadcast, then that's going to have an impact on the main story life kind of thing. And then at the very end, you're presented with what I was surprised to see. I knew there was going to be multiple endings. There's like 15 or so different endings, I think. Again, memory, but like something along those lines. So like there are drastically different things that can happen, and a lot of different things that can happen based on what you end up doing throughout the broadcast, and then the story, the home life moments. Again, some super serious moments, and then that's cut sometimes by like some just off the wall, goofy, almost slapstick type moments. But I think that sometimes don't necessarily hit. Sometimes the commentary things on like the political commentary things, sometimes those don't hit. Sometimes the comedy doesn't hit. But like to me, like the highs and the most interesting parts of both the gameplay and the story it's trying to tell, and some of the actual scenes and interviews and stories you get while you're doing the broadcast thing, the highs of those moments, I think I think outweigh some of the lower moments of the game. But there are definitely low moments where you're like, oh, that's not hitting right. But yeah, that's not for broadcast. My favorite FMV game of this year. My number 2 game, and probably a game many people had at the top of their list at the game when this game originally came out, and I'll be 100% honest, totally gets the boot to number 2. Probably just the fact that I only got to it this year. It's a game from a previous year. Basically the house rule I had given at the start of this list. And if I would have played this game on the year that it came out, I probably would have put it higher, or it probably would have been like a number 1. But it gets a number 2, which is still really good, I think, on my list. Everyone's favorite, Hades. Hades is my number 2 game this year. Let's see. Another mythological-esque subject matter game, the second on this list technically. Everyone's favorite rogue-lite game built upon run after run after run after run, and then getting better, leveling up certain aspects as you go after run after run. It's one of those things I'm struggling. Where do I start? Where do I begin talking about this game? Because this is obviously a game many people know about, many people have played, many people enjoy. It's kind of like one of those things as you get up the list and you start talking about a game that came out years ago. It's like, what else can I add to the conversation? But it's super fun. My favorite aspects of this game, I was talking about how, like, in God of War, I was annoyed by the menus. This is one of those games, I'll talk about the menus. That's a fun thing to talk about. You know what? Whenever you're trying to talk about how fun a game is, talk about everyone's favorite things, the menus. But this game, super satisfying menus. It does a thing where if you're about to choose an upgrade and then you're like, oh, but it uses like a little picture or something, or doesn't explain like a buff or something, then it gives you a little tooltip on the side, or it's like, this is what someone being chilled means. And you're like, thank God that keeps being told, or what the exact specifics are. I don't have to go into some other random ass menu to try to remember what the hell someone being tipsy does or something like that. But, yeah, super satisfying gameplay. You constantly feel cool as you're like zipping in and out of combat and dodging and shooting and different weapons. You're punch, or shoot, or throw shield thing. I had a lot of fun with this game. I think my favorite things, again, weirdly, combat, great. Gameplay, actually fun. The menu stuff, cool. I think I'd kind of known about it. Obviously, I knew a lot about Hades before playing it, and a lot of people love this game. Just how much dialogue there is, because the story of this game is done basically just through dialogue between all the different characters. Mostly the main character, Zagreus, and then all the other different mythological people that you're familiar with from middle school or high school or whatever. You know, everyone had... I'm convinced everyone had a I'm really into mythology phase at some point in their lives. So all your favorites are here. Dionysus, Hades, Dude with Boulder, Thanatos, Persephone, Zeus, Demeter, and then some new characters, like my favorite, Dusa. She's great. She's just like a Medusa head. Maid person. She was great. Loved her. But yeah, again, what do I say that hasn't already been said, or everyone knows that this game, like I said, super tight roguelite type game that is always satisfying. Even if you die, you start getting really good at the game. You start learning what you can do as far as like movements and the boon effects, and you start like getting your favorite builds going. You start realizing what builds you're most accustomed to and the ones that are going to carry you to success. You clear time after time, or you lose time after time. You clear many times. You start unraveling the story with the different dialogues. As I was kind of saying earlier, I think I lost my train of thought, but just how much dialogue there is. The story is told all through dialogue, and constantly, you would always, I would see a character or a boss, and you have a dialogue before the boss fights, or a new character pops up, or a character that you're returning back home, the hub world, and you're like, there's no way in hell there's more dialogue between Zagreus and this Achilles or whatever. No, there must be a million voice lines. It's all voiced. There must be a million lines, and I think that's super clever, because like in a game like this, and a game that is inherently repetitive, you would probably think, if it wasn't for Supergiant's like pedigree, that at some point you would run to a point where you just have repetitive dialogue, but that's not the case. And you're constantly fed new and new lines and moments and stuff between these characters, and just kept you engaging, even if you were dying, even if you died and had to go start from the beginning, like it softened that blow, because you knew you would go back to the homeworld. You know you'd go back, you'd spend some upgrades, point things, whatever, darkness, gems, whatever the fuck. But like you were going to be fed some new stories, some new dialogue lines between Zagreus and the different characters, and you're like, you know what, it's fine if I die, if I don't win, if I don't have a good successful run, or I get screwed over by something in the gameplay, it's fine, because I'm going to unravel more of the story. And that's one of the most satisfying things of this game, and at least to me, why it is so good. Obviously, the super stylistic art style. Yeah, that'll stay. Again, voice work, excellent. Characterization, great of these characters. The thing is, I was talking earlier, everyone has their mythological, I'm totally into mythology phase in their life. And I think because of that, I think you can do mythology stuff and characters in a very boring way and in a very boring fashion. And so like you have to like get over that part as like if you're going to make a story about with these characters and stuff. Again, it doesn't hurt that they really leaned into the horny, sexy aspect of some of these gods and goddesses to kind of get the internet on its side, because I really want to say, I'm not saying people weren't horny before this game came out, but like I feel like this game came out and that kicked off like what I don't know what else to refer to it other than, you know what, the general public loves horniness in video game. Unabashed horniness in video games is fine if you do it correctly and you're not corny and cheesy about it, right? Like that's, I feel like Hades kicks this all off. Again, there was horny thing. People were horny pre Hades for sure, just in general on the internet. That's fine, but I mean like Hades kicked it off, I feel like. So like I said, Hades gets number 2. Super excited for Hades. It's funny, or Hades 2. Did I say? I really enjoyed Hades. Really enjoyed Hades. I'm excited for Hades 2, which was announced recently. Supergiant, a studio that didn't really do sequel stuff. They basically had like a style, and a lot of their games are roguelike games. And they're all pretty good. But it's them being like, hey, people are really into Hades. Let's just give them what they want, more of it. Hades 2, super excited for. Can't wait till it's fully released, because Lord knows I can't get into pre-release alpha game kind of, or a early release. What do they call it? Early, whatever the term I'm looking for. Pre-release, beta version things. I just want to, when it's full release. 1.0, I'll play Hades 2. Very excited. And that means we've gotten to number 1. My number 1 favorite game this year. Whenever I finalize the list and I get the number 1, I always like look at the list. I'm like, in a year's time, will I stand by this and be like, this was my favorite game this year? I always it's like a full 24 hours where in my head, that's the thought that I have. I go, am I good with standing by this? And I say yes. My number 1 game, Neon White. This game, which I'll talk about for a while here, maybe, just made me feel cool while playing it. Very smart design-wise. But before I get into that, I want to say, I saw, even just this past week, when some other internet people's list came out of favorite games, and I would see if I ever saw Neon White get mentioned, I was like, cool, that's probably going to be my number 1 game. But a lot of people's opinion is that just skip through the story. Just skip through the story. The story's stupid. Oh, the characters are stupid. The gameplay, I just want to... Fine. If that's your opinion, first off, my brain can't just turn off or want to skip through the story of a game. Like, my brain is just incapable of doing that. Like, if you present a game to me and I start playing it, I want to, even if it sucks, like, I'm going to see to the end of it. I'm not just going to skip over story thing. But I think, like, people were saying, like, oh, the story of Neon White and these characters are obnoxious and it's not good. It's so weird, and such a weird, like, in my opinion, take to have, because sure, it's over the top anime, like old school kind of, like the comparison I always saw it compared to was like old school Toonami anime bullshit in like the best of ways, in my opinion. Sure, some of the characters are annoying, a little bit annoying, but like intentionally, like that's their character traits or something. I don't know. It's over the top. It's over the top storyline, and some like biblical reference-esque type shit during the story. That's like, sure, I can get why people might be into it, but like the distaste I saw some people talk of the story, but then in the same breath be like, oh, but the game is great, gameplay is fun, I love doing leaderboard stuff, but then, oh yeah, just keep pressing skip through the dialogue. I'm like, what? It's not that bad. It's weird. Whatever. Neon White is a... I remember when I first saw it, people were originally pitching it as like card game platformer, but once you just say card game, that's immediately you're wrong. It's a platformer like game. It's more like platform first person shooting puzzle game. The cards act as like the puzzle part to it all, because you're platforming and you're supposed to go fast and do certain things and actions and everything, and all the cards you pick along the stage are your abilities, because then you pick up the cards and they have two effects. So you can shoot different shoot, or they do like a different movement effect, so like a dash or a teleport or a double jump or something like that. So you're constantly balancing between shoot enemies, because you got to clear all the enemies in the stage, go super fast, and then super platforming thing. And like I said, I think it's one of those games that constantly make you feel cool just by the strength of its like level design. Very early on, you're told like, okay, to clear a level, you gotta kill all the bad guys in the level and then make it to the end. And if you fall, you restart. If you die, you restart. You have lives. You die, you restart. And the game is at its best when a level is like 30 seconds or a minute long at most, and you're going super fast and you're shooting and you're getting things at just the right times, right angles, certain platforming things. You're going fast, and it's like, I don't know how to describe it because I'm not a fucking smart person, but like the level design is so good at making you feel like you just pulled something off amazingly. And the puzzly aspects of the cards themselves is super fun, to the point where I did the thing. Oh, it's super fun. The cards are so well placed in levels, to the point where it really has that puzzle aspect. Light is shined on a level, as far as being able to really, each level is like a test of reflexes in the shooting, and when you're supposed to shoot, and when you're supposed to use cards for actions, your jumps and stuff. But like the fun parts, even during long levels, was, okay, I'm gonna get this card here. Why would they intentionally? Because they put the cards there intentionally, right? So what's this card supposed to do in this exact moment? Why is it giving it to me now? Do I hold on to it for a little bit, or am I supposed to immediately use it? Use whatever the movement action is to get to the next platform, whatever the case is. Like, it's such smart design. And then, so you do a level and you clear it, and then they're like, all right, but if you clear it a little faster, then you'll get a gold rank. And you're like, all right, I'll clear it a little faster. And then they're like, if you want that ace score, then you got to find a shortcut. And you're like, what? And they're like, we intentionally put a shortcut in this level that you probably didn't see during your normal clear of it. And they put a little logo like in the level, and they're like, if you find that thing, that'll give you a hint as to what the shortcut is. And then you can do that shortcut thing, and then you're gonna feel even cooler. It's gonna make you feel like you broke the level a bit. So then you're like, oh shit, you're looking around and you're trying to find the shortcut, and then you're like, oh, you did it. And you're like, oh, I never even thought that I could do that kind of thing in this level, or that connects that way. And so you do that, and so you did the level now like essentially at least 2 times. Most of the time in that case, you've done it at least 2 times. You did it as fast as you could, the most normal way possible, and then they gave you a hint as to like how to almost like break the level. And you're like, that's super fun. And then they go, there's a third thing you can do in this level. You could get that's the ace medal, ace platinum medal looking thing. And then if you really care, you can like, they do the leaderboard thing. You can try, if you have friends list, you can beat like their top times. I had no want or drive to do that. Like once I got ace time on all levels with a controller, mind you. That's how good I am. No mouse and keyboard, controller only. I have no need to like do like, oh, just try to perfect timing. Like that's not my type of thing to do. But then they go, okay, so you got the ace score, you found the shortcut. Now we hit a special item. And this special item you can then bring to the characters in the story to get more like backstory or lore or story happenings between the different characters. Because like, I'm talking, this whole time I've been talking about like the level design and like the actual gameplay. The other half of the gameplay is like the story, and then you do like these very basic minimum like persona, give them an item, and then you get like, give enough items, you get like either a secret level or like a little story blip and bob about between the two characters or something. And I'll get to the secret levels in a bit here, but they're like, here's a third thing where you hit a special item somewhere in the level, and instead of going through this level super fast and in the quickest and most fluid way possible, instead we want you to like even bigger puzzle, try to hold on to some of the items as best you can for like backup. Like you have to hold on to like build your hand of items a lot of cards. I'm failing my words are failing me. But you try to puzzle around like to a platform behind a platform that you never even saw, find the item, and you have to essentially break the level in a different way other than the shortcut way, but in like conserve items and gun cards for different movement abilities, break it that way. And so then you're using your brain a different way of like, okay, I can get to this platform by not using this card, and I can hold on to this card, but I will just use my natural, like my one jump, and I'll use this. Like, you have to then just think in a different way of platforming, which again, super satisfying. My only problem, the shortcut way and the items, finding the hidden items, became a lot less fun as you got later on in the game. Mostly because as you got later in the game, levels became longer and bigger and more vertical and more horizontal and stretched out and bigger. And that aspect of finding the shortcut hint and finding the hidden item was a little less fun when levels are so big, because then you're just spending a lot of time moving around being like, where the fuck is this thing? Like, I liked the longer levels as just levels and then trying to get the ace scores. That was fine. But the extra aspects of trying to find the hidden items and the shortcut hints was a lot less fun in those large levels, because you could be looking up and down. You're like, where the fuck? Like, the fun parts of the game was not spending 10 to 15 minutes in a huge ass level trying to find the things. I liked finding the objects in short levels because there's like, oh, there's only so many places it could be, and moving around the small level wasn't as obnoxious. But if like you were in one of those big ass levels and then you die, and then you get sent back to the beginning, because if you die, and they just send you back to the beginning of the level to restart the timer. But you're like, ah, shit, now I gotta go through, like, especially like, let's say the hidden item object was like towards the end of the level, and it is a level that's like a minute and a half long. So you spend like 5 minutes looking up and down everywhere the first like maybe like 15 seconds of the level. Then you spend another 5 minutes searching the next 15 seconds of the level. But if you were to accidentally die, then you gotta restart and make your way back through all that parts that you've really done a deep search for, and then you gotta refine. So it ended up getting to the point where for most of the, man, all this that I'm saying, if you didn't play Neon White, you're gonna be like, what the hell are you going on about? But I guess that's just the nature of these things. There were some final levels where they were so big, and I looked for like, I was going on like 15, 20 minutes or so, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna look it up. I just had to look up where the things were, because I was like, there's no way in hell I'm not gonna collect all the items, but I'm not gonna spend another hour on the same level looking everywhere. And then some of them are really well hidden. It's just, it was much. That's my own one little knock on this game. So yeah, those were the main levels. They very cleverly, you would think like, okay, so it's like time trial things. How the hell would you have a boss fight in these things? And then they do like, they don't overuse boss mechanics, which is a big plus. But every once in a while, there's a few bosses in the game that are done, I think, super cleverly. They still keep the whole time trial aspect of moving through levels through them, and they're still super satisfying, and you're not really like just like, oh, I'm just wailing on the boss. It's like you're still moving through levels. So they keep the fluid gameplay still intact during the boss fight levels. So that's cool. Then there's the main story, and like I said, side things where you're just like talking to characters. You're Neon White. You're this dude. Neon White as a character, and again, kind of a dork, kind of like Zach. I mean, different kind of dork, but kind of a dork nonetheless. Some of the other characters are super fun. I love Neon Violet, but Neon White, just say that. Yeah, you sometimes would unlock side like levels when you interact with these characters. You give them enough gifts and they give you like a secret level, and each character had different aspects of secret levels. So like Neon Violet's secret levels were built like almost like Jigsaw the Saw type like levels where there's spikes everywhere and you got to platform exactly correctly and kind of use your brain that way. Then Neon Yellow, I believe, you weren't able to either shoot or you weren't able to do the movement abilities on cards. One of those two things. So like then you have to not relearn, but know what the cards do, and like re-look at levels and be like, okay, I can only use the shooting aspect of the card, or I can only use the movement action of the cards, and how is that going to impact the actual platforming and everything. Again, super cool level design. It makes you feel really special as you complete a level. Music is great. Again, it fits the aesthetic of the game and the art direction and style of that game a whole lot. And I highly recommend. And I would say give the story a shot and don't just skip through the dialogue, because in my opinion, that's a weird thing to do for a video game. Yeah, Neon White. I stand by it as my #1 game that I played this year. So that does it for the list and for my filming of this. Really hoping that here's the hope where once I start editing all this footage, I can make some coherent thoughts out of the editing process here into the list. As I said, I tried to talk a bit more and better about the games on the list than last year's, where I feel I just kept going like, it was good. It was good. It was good. If I remember to, I should have linked to all these games, except for I think technically one of them, because copyright strike stuff. I'll put links to the playlists of me actually playing the games, because I play these games on stream, in the description of this video. So if you want to go see more of the gameplay or my thoughts during any one of this exact games, those are in there. You do that, you can go, I guess, then to the channel and see me other games that I didn't enjoy as much as these ones. You can go listen to me complain through the Phoenix Wright series, for instance. But yeah, that's pretty much, I think, all I had to say. On to 2023, because obviously games are gonna continue to come out, and I know of some games I'm gonna tackle that came out this year and in years past that are supposed to be good, and then they'll make it into 2023, and we'll keep going. The list keeps going. I keep going. The earth keeps spinning. Hopefully. How else do I end this video?